emotions, and he was subject. He was at peace with himself. And so when he went to meet Esau, Esau could feel this person, he could feel that Jacob was completely at peace with himself. If Jacob had been in conflict with himself, this would have resonated with the conflict within Esau. But because Jacob was completely at peace with himself, this peaceful atmosphere and spirit went to Esau, and Esau then felt, this kind of thing as well.
So you don't think he bodily wrestled with an angel?
He may have done, but at the end of the day, I think that's what it means substantially. It was like that. And, this may have happened then, but then also I'm interested to know how does this affect our own spiritual life and, kind of things that we go through ourselves, which are, by analogy, similar to that. So I can imagine, if you think, he's just a physical wrestling with an angel, it's not so profound. But if you realize actually what he's wrestling with in that sense with his fears, and he was able to overcome them and become completely an integrated person, and so he got victory over himself. So that's what Father often says, before you can get victory over the world, you have to get victory over yourself. And so that's what Jacob was doing. He was getting, became completely self-controlled, completely at peace.
That does hark back to what God said to Cain. He said, your sin is crouching at the door, you have to master it.
Yes, and so that's what very good connection. So that's what he was doing there. He was doing that. And anyway, so before the angel went, he gave him a kicking, and put his hip out of joint. So when he went to meet Esau, he went along with a limp. So sometimes you go through these battles and you come out with scars. It's not that he came out untouched by this thing that he went through. And so he won, by wrestling with this, he won the respect of the angel, and he was qualified then to win the respect of Esau. And there are lots of different ways you can interpret this. This is the way there are lots of ways you can interpret this. This is the interpretation I find the most useful myself. There are other ones to do with, he's wrestling with Esau's spirit and all sorts of other things. Okay, so then next morning he gets up and he goes ahead, and behind him is his wife, is Leah and her children, and at the back is Rachel and Joseph. And then Jacob then approached Esau, and it says here, Jacob went on bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So what was going on here? Jacob bowed himself to the ground 7 times. So why was he doing that? What did that signify?
He was fulfilling the blessing that Esau was supposed to get, that your brother will bow down to you.
That's right. So let's go and have a look at that. Backtrack for those of you who weren't here last week. This was a blessing that Isaac wanted to give to Esau, but that Jacob stole. And this blessing says, May God give you the heavens dew and earth's richness and abundance of grain and new wine. In other words, lots of wealth. Yeah? But then also, be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. So what Jacob was doing here, he was fulfilling the blessing that Isaac wanted to give to Esau, but that Jacob had stolen. So he's, in that sense, Jacob's returning the blessing that he'd taken from Esau, he's returning it to Esau. He's fulfilling the blessing that God wanted to give to Esau, so he's returning the blessing he'd stolen. Yeah? So in that sense, it was restoration. He's restoring what he'd done wrong by returning the blessing. This follows on from what I was talking about last week. I don't know if you may... do you know what I'm going on about? Because the only thing is, Lika, and I don't know if... Because, well, the way I'm teaching the story is different than the way I used to teach it. That's all. You're following, yes. Because originally, the way I used to understand it was that Jacob was supposed to get Esau's blessing, but actually I realize now that was a mistake. And that was why he almost got killed. So in order to restore that mistake, he's returning the blessing that he took away from Esau. So he's fulfilling it. So it's,
I have one question.
yes, good.
Well, wasn't it his mom, Rebecca, who made this happen?
That's right, exactly.
Why do you call it a mistake?
Okay, very good question. Very good question. Okay, so if you remember, Isaac said to Esau, I want to give you my blessing, but before I give you my blessing, go and find me some food and make me a nice meal. And Rebecca was outside the tent and she overheard this conversation. And she told Jacob, you go make a meal and you go and get the blessing. So what does that signify about the relationship between Isaac and Rebecca?
Rebecca was doing the will of God, right?
Sorry?
Rebecca thought that she had to do the will.
Yeah, okay, but before we go to that, how did Rebecca find out what Isaac was going to do?
From overhearing.
Which means,
He didn't
yes, Isaac didn't tell her. She didn't know what he was doing. So what does that mean, signify about the relationship between Isaac and Rebecca? Not much, they weren't communicating. So what they should have done, they should have woken up early in the morning. They should have done hunduke. And they should have said, right, what are we going to do today? And Isaac should have said, well, actually, I think it's a good day for us to give the blessing to Esau. And then Rebecca said, well, why do you want to do that? And they would have had a conversation about it, they would have discussed it. But they didn't discuss it. And so Rebecca only found out about it because she overheard the conversation. Okay, so that's why they weren't discussing it. That's the first thing. The second thing, who should give the blessing to the children? Sorry? Yes, Isaac and Rebecca should have given the blessing to Esau together and blessed Jacob together. It shouldn't have been Isaac just giving the blessing to Esau by himself. The parents together should have given the blessing to their children. So obviously there's something, wrong. You're not working properly in the family. That's the first thing. The second thing is, when we look at this, we'll see that actually this is the blessing that Isaac wanted to give to Esau. Okay? But then just before Jacob left to go to Haran, he went to say goodbye to Isaac, and Isaac gave Jacob a blessing. Isaac said to Jacob, may God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so you may take possession of the land where you live as an alien, the land God gave to Abraham. So what kind of blessing is this? Do you recognize the language here? Be fruitful, multiply, dominion over the land. This is the blessing God gave to Adam and Eve. He says here, you should inherit Abraham's blessing. In other words, this is the blessing for the person who has the birthright. So Jacob got the birthright, and this is the blessing Isaac wanted to give to Jacob because Jacob had the birthright. He was to become the heir and the next head of the family. Yeah? So this is the blessing Isaac gave to Jacob. But then, if we look back here, this is the blessing that Isaac wanted to give to Esau. This one is not a religious blessing. And God's mentioned at the beginning, but the language, the first part is about being rich, wealthy, having heaven's dew, lots of grain, lots of wine. In other words, you can be very rich and prosperous. The second part is about power. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. So that's a position of power. Okay? So the way I see it is that Isaac worked out in his head, I'm going to give a blessing to Jacob and a blessing to Esau. This is the blessing I want to give to Esau, and this is the blessing I want to give to Jacob. But the problem was, he didn't explain this to Rebecca. So Rebecca thought, he only has one blessing to give, and he's going to give it all to Esau. But actually that wasn't what Isaac was planning. Isaac had worked it all out in his head, This is for Esau, that's for Jacob. But he didn't explain it to his wife. And so Rebecca misunderstood what was going on. So when she overheard it, she didn't go into the tent and say to Isaac, "What are you doing? Why are you going to give why are you going to give everything to Esau? What about Jacob?" She just came up with her own plan. Yes? So, you want to say something, Christabel?
Did Isaac know about the pottage and lentil birthright swap?
I think probably yes.
And that happened way before?
That happened, years before. And also in the Talmud, which is not in the Bible, it also says there that Abraham, who was still alive that time, because the pottage of lentils was food that was made for Isaac because Abraham had died. Do you know that? No. Okay. So lentils is a very simple kind of food. It's normally richer food. He's eating lentils because he's in mourning, and he's in mourning because Abraham had died. Okay. But anyway, in the Talmud it says that Abraham could see that Jacob was the better of the two sons, and Abraham had already given Jacob his blessing. And you can imagine Abraham would have told Isaac this. And so, the fact is that Isaac wanted to give the blessing Isaac wanted to give to Jacob was Adam's blessing and Abraham's blessing. In other words, a blessing that belonged to the person who had the birthright. So I can imagine he must have known, or at least he knew that Jacob was the one who was qualified and deserved to get it. It was a mistake, because so she didn't understand what Isaac was planning, because they didn't communicate, and so I think what she did was a mistake. So she did that based upon the fact that she loved Jacob more than she loved Esau. Jacob was her favorite, and also she had this dream when she was pregnant, and so she thought this is God's will, and it was God's will that Jacob should get the birthright blessing. But she didn't understand that Isaac was going to give Jacob the birthright blessing, but also he wanted to give a blessing to Esau. So it was a mix-up because of a lack of communication. Yes, that makes sense?
Yeah, it's like my understanding was completely changed because I don't know, maybe in Japan when I was hearing the principle about this, I remember that they said Rebecca is a very, very faithful person, and what she did, even though she needed drink, but it was something that it had to be done.
Yes, so that's the normal teaching in the Unification Church, and that's what I used to think. But over the last year I've changed, because I've been reading the Bible more, and then because I always felt really uncomfortable with the fact that it was deception that was involved. And that was it's unethical. And then, when you think about it, when you pull the story a bit further, if you pull the story apart in the way I have, let's look at the relationship between Isaac and Rebecca, lack of communication. Let's look at the fact that Jacob got a blessing from Esau, this blessing here. So Isaac already had a blessing for Jacob. And so what's happened is that Jacob took Esau's blessing. The result of taking Esau's blessing was what? He nearly got himself killed. Yeah? Which is Cain and Abel. He almost got killed. It was a terrible mistake. Yes? If he hadn't taken Esau's blessing, would Esau want to kill him? No. So to make a foundation of substance means they need to unite. He doesn't need to take Esau's blessing. He doesn't need to steal Esau's blessing. So I think it was just a misunderstanding.
And that unity doesn't really work if that unity is achieved by force or deception.
Sure. Doesn't work.
It has to be unity of the heart, not just external dominion.
Yeah. So, if we carry on. So what went on here then is that Esau knew what was going on. He realized by giving all this wealth, Jacob was returned, and also by bowing, Jacob was fulfilling the blessing that Isaac wanted to give to Esau. So Jacob was returning the blessing he'd taken from Esau. And that's why Esau was overwhelmed. He realized what was going on. He realized his brother was apologizing. His brother was making it up. And so he was overwhelmed by emotion and he lost control of himself. And he ran towards him and wept. Yes, his whole heart was moved because he understood what was going on. He understood Jacob was making it up, and that was really moving to him. That Jacob was admitting that what he'd done was wrong. He was restoring it, he was giving everything back, and he was behaving like a good younger brother, bowing down to his older brother. And so he was restoring the proper relationship. And so Esau's heart was moved. Esau lost control. He just started weeping and was so overwhelmed by emotion, and they just embraced. And let's have a look at their conversation. Then Esau says, "What do you mean by all this company? In other words, all these sheep that I have met?" And Jacob said, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Jacob here is calling his older brother my Lord. Yes, he's been very humble. He's been a good younger brother to his older brother. And Esau said, "Oh, it's okay, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Then Jacob says, "I pray you, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present." So this word present in the Hebrew means gift, it means blessing. Accept my blessing from my hand. In other words, I'm giving the blessing back to you. Accept my present from my hand, for truly to see your face is like seeing the face of God. With such favor you receive me. Yes? To see your face is like seeing the face of God. So Jacob then could see God in Esau and was really showing incredible respect for Esau, expressing the incredible love he had for Esau. "Accept, I pray you, my gift that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have enough." So Jacob wasn't saying, "Look, I've worked really hard, look how wealthy and powerful and I am." He has been a really good younger brother. Yes, he's taking the position of being a younger brother and recognizing the authority of Esau as an older brother. And that's what he was doing, he's restoring things. And so you can see here, then they made this foundation substance, because Esau, anyway. So what was going on here is Jacob then was restoring the mistake that he'd made, and so they were able to be reconciled. So Jacob then won Esau's heart, and together they fulfilled the indemnity condition and removed the fallen nature. So the point is, Jacob was really humble. Jacob made it easy for Esau to overcome his resentment. Yes? Jacob didn't go along saying, "Look, I've been away for 21 years. Look how hard I work. Look at my wives, my children. I've been done so well. You should really respect me." Yes? Actually, he was like a real little boy, little younger brother to his older brother. And that sense, it made it easy for Esau to love him. He made himself lovable. He made it easy for Esau to respect him. Yeah? But if you...
Sorry, let's go back. And I'm thinking respectively anyway, that when we think of the original Cain and Abel story, it was a mistake for Cain to have killed Abel.
Of course.
And then I just worry that if everything had gone to plan, like Jacob and Rebecca began to talk, and Esau had Esau's blessing from Isaac, and Jacob had Jacob's blessing, Jacob's from Isaac, whether that problem could have been resolved, with this mistake, because this is a mistake, it's a problem. Whether this could have been, you understand that?
Yes, I do. Right, but let's carry on and have a look.
Yeah.
What happened next? I haven't written it down yet. I'm just about to. Jacob and Esau, they were reconciled.
Yes.
And then Esau said, why don't you come home with me to where I live? And Jacob said, "Oh, no, I can't. I'm not going to go. Everything's too tired. We'll come along later." And actually, Jacob didn't go back to live with Esau. Jacob then, he went home to Canaan, because Esau was living outside Canaan. Jacob went to see Isaac. He went home to be with Isaac. And anyway, they met a few times after that. But it was, what was going on here was Jacob was restoring the mistake that he'd made. And he was being reconciled with Esau. But I don't think the proper foundation substance wasn't made. I'll explain what should have happened. This is what should have happened. Esau's older and Jacob's younger. Is it easy for an older brother to take advice from a younger brother? No. Difficult. Okay? So that's what had to happen, though. What had to happen is, in order to make a foundation of substance, Cain, or Esau, had to love Jacob. Esau had to respect Jacob. Esau had to, listen to Jacob and follow Jacob's directions. Esau and Jacob together had to multiply goodness. Now, did they actually do that here? They didn't. So the foundation substance wasn't completely fulfilled. They didn't work together. They didn't multiply goodness together.
Are you talking about after they reconciled or before?
After they reconciled, but they didn't actually stay together and do good things together. I'll talk about why later, but let's think of what should have happened. So what should have happened is that Jacob, growing up, Jacob should have been like a good younger brother to Esau. And a good younger brother, how do they feel about their older brother? They look up to them. They admire them. They're proud of them. Yes? And if you've got a younger brother who looks up at you and is proud of you, naturally, you love them. Yes? Okay, it's the first thing. So, whereas Jacob, though, was a bit, to be perfectly honest, the way that Jacob behaved, as did Joseph, as did Abel, really got up his brother's nose. You know what I mean by that? Jacob was more intelligent and cleverer than Esau. Yes? You can imagine both of them going to school. Jacob was the one that always got the A stars, and Esau was the one that always got C's and D's and E's. Yes? And then the younger brother, who's a couple of years behind in school, actually knew much more. And supposing he said to his older brother, "Oh, you're just lazy. You're so stupid. I'm much cleverer than you." And how does the older brother feel? He just wants to go and kill him. Yeah. So if you're like that and you're much cleverer than your older brother, what do you have to do? You have to still admire and respect your older brother and make it easy for him to love you. That's the first thing. You have to become lovable. Abel and Jacob and Joseph didn't make themselves lovable. Yeah, they kept on coming up with all these things, and they really annoyed their older brothers, so the older brothers wanted to kill them. First thing, you need to be lovable. The second, Esau needed to be able to respect Jacob. So Jacob needed to be respectable, worthy of being respected. And so Jacob was much cleverer than Esau. So what he should have done, first of all, to admire his older brother, wow, you're a brilliant hunter, you go out hunting, you bring all these amazing things, you do this and this and this, praising his older brother, because Jacob, of course, stayed at home doing the cooking and all this sort of stuff at home with his mum. It was his mother's favourite. And instead of admiring his brother, he probably, looked down, oh, brothers, he's just big and coarse and, he's a bully and all these sorts of things, kind of things he would have thought and said. Anyway, so Jacob then, who was more intelligent, so he should have thought, well, actually, Esau, you're very good at hunting, but look, there's a good way of making a trap so you can catch these animals, yes? And so maybe Jacob might have thought, well, how can I help my brother to become a better hunter? Because he might have seen some ideas. And then he would have had to think, how can I present this idea to my brother in a way he can accept easily? Yeah. So first of all, I have to be humble, have to be lovable, have to love and admire a brother. Then I have to make this offer, this idea to my brother. What do you think about this, older brother? Do you think this is a good idea? Yes? Do you think it's a good idea? Not, this is a better idea than yours. But do you think this is a good idea? I just suddenly got this idea. And then Esau, because of the way in which Jacob offered the idea, and because he loved his younger brother, and he said, yeah, that's a brilliant idea, younger brother. Yeah, let's try it. So he would then realize Jacob had all these brilliant ideas, so he could have respected Jacob. And then they would say, okay, let's do this together. And they would have, Jacob would have then said, well, okay, this is the way you do it, and you do it like this and this, and Esau would have found himself just listening to and doing what his younger brother told him to do. And he could do that because he knew his younger brother loved him and admired him and respected him. Yeah? Then he could do that. and then they would have multiplied goodness together, so they would have just become better hunters. They would have been much more successful. So it's like they would have started a business together. Yes? And Jacob would have been the one with all the brilliant ideas, and Esau would have been the one, who's much stronger and everything, and they would have worked together. They would have complemented each other. And that would have been the proper foundation and substance. Jacob should have helped Esau to overcome his fallen nature and to be able to love him and respect him and multiply goodness together, etc., etc., etc. Okay? That's what should have happened. But that's not what happened. So, and if it had been like that, then Esau would have thought to himself, actually Jacob will be a better head of the family when Dad dies than me. Yeah? He'd become a better head of the family, and Esau would have said to Jacob, look Jacob, I got this birthright. I want to give it to you, because I think you're the one that deserves it. You'll be a better head of the family after Dad dies than me. You've got the better ideas, you're wiser, you're more, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, and we can do stuff together. You know what I mean? That's how it should have been. Does that happen very often? No. Anyway, it did happen in one story I'll tell you another time, with David and Jonathan, but another story with this interesting king, Sejong. King Sejong was probably the greatest Korean king, but he was not the first in line to the throne. He was the third brother. He had two older brothers. So normally when their dad died, the oldest brother would have become the next king. But the oldest brothers, the two older brothers, they talked amongst themselves and they said to each other, actually, Sejong is much wiser than us. He's more intelligent than us, and he's a better sense of judgment than us, and actually, he would make a better king than either of us. And for the sake of the country, it's better for him to become the king instead of us. But of course, they couldn't decide that. It was automatically, after the king died, the eldest brother would become the next king. So what the two older brothers did, they thought, well, okay, we need to disqualify ourselves from becoming the next king. So they both behaved really badly at the court, and they were rude and did all sorts of bad things. And so one of them was exiled, kicked out of the country, went to live in China, and the other one went to live in a monastery and became a monk. And so when their father died, then Sejong became the next king. So that's an example of transferring the birthright. Yeah? That's a remarkable story in Korean history, that foundation substance. That's what should have happened with Jacob and Esau. And then, that's what should have happened. So, but what did happen is that Jacob got the birthright by trickery. And the principle says he very cleverly obtained. Cleverly means like kind of trickily. It wasn't that he won Esau's respect, he just bought the birthright. So he hadn't won Esau's heart or respect, he just bought it. Yeah, and then he stole his blessing. So of course, Esau was really upset and angry. And so Jacob had to go away for 21 years, and during this 21 years, he understood his brother's heart. He understood why his brother was upset. He realized he'd done something wrong, and then he realized, I need to go back and make it up. I need to go back and put right what I did wrong. I need to go and restore it. So that's what this 21 years was, Jacob making conditional indemnity so he could go back and meet Esau again and restore what he'd done wrong, which was to return the blessing he'd stolen. And so that's why that was what was being restored, but by that time, too much water had passed under the bridge. You know what I mean? It wasn't possible then for Jacob and Esau to work together, to live together, to really make a proper foundation of substance. And Jacob realized this, and so he went into Canaan. And the proper foundation of substance was made later, which we'll look at in a moment. Okay, so Jacob then established the pattern for the natural and voluntary subjugation of Satan by winning Esau's heart and respect. So that's the point. Abel needs to win the heart and respect of Cain. It's a voluntary subjugation of Satan through love, not through force, not through trickery, not through violence, not through knowledge, not through truth, none of this, but through winning a heart and respect. Yes, which is what he should have done at the very beginning, but he didn't. I mean, who does? Not his fault. And so this is the pattern then followed later by Joseph and Moses and Jesus and Father. And so Abraham's family then established the heavenly tradition. And that's how I talk about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's passed through these 3 generations. This becomes the basis of the 3 great kingships. And this then, and the principle it says, this is the foundation to receive the Messiah. But the foundation substance should have been the unity of Cain and Abel, unity of Jacob and Esau, but in the Bible it says that they separated. And from Jacob come the Jewish people, and from Esau came the Edomites. And the Jews and the Edomites were enemies for quite a lot of the time. Yeah? So you can see there, it was a moment. What happened at that meeting was Jacob restored the mistake he'd made. But they didn't really unite and become one. Because together they didn't become the ancestors of the chosen people, which is what should have happened. Yeah? So we'll look at what happens next. Does this make sense? I said, I just figured this out with a bit of help from different commentaries. I've been reading, and thinking. Because I've taught this for more than 20, sorry. To go into the next decade now. 30 years. And I've always found different ways of presenting it, because I've never felt that it was a way which made sense. In the sense it was convincing to human nature, and also it was correct. And it's only this past year, finally, the pieces have fallen into place in a way which makes much more sense to me. Yeah, and which figures much more with human nature. Lack of unity between husband and wife, father and mother, this and this and this. Oh, okay, now that makes much more sense. And now I can understand. You see, the traditional idea is that Cain should bow down to Abel, but did Esau bow down to Jacob? No, Esau didn't bow down to Jacob. Yeah, Jacob bowed down to Esau, because what Jacob was doing was restoring the mistake he'd made. It wasn't until later that things had worked out properly.
So there are other times in Old Testament history when great deception does occur, such as when Sarah goes with the Pharaoh, and Abraham says, "This is my sister," but it's not. It's true. It is his half sister.
Yes.
But there's another occasion when who is it who wants to conceive a child? Both her husbands die, and the father won't give her the next son.
Tamar.
And that was a straight deception. And so, are you saying that also that was wrong to use deception in that case?
All I can say is when you do this, it has consequences.
I mean, she needed to ensure that the lineage God is preparing continues.
Right.
And so, our understanding is that deception is not the best way, but it's better than the consequences of not deceiving. So,
Let's come.
Justify deception, but that's a very dangerous game to play.
Yes, it is, and that's what got our movement into a lot of trouble.
And then when you look at the story, do you think there's another way that all of those could have been done without deception?
Right, and so sometimes presented as a deception is necessary in itself, but actually it's not. It was wrong.
It's almost like we say two wrongs don't make a right, but it's
Right.
almost like we're saying, well, Lucifer deceived Eve, so we have to deceive Lucifer to get our own back.
Anyway, as I said, when the Pharaoh said to Abraham, "Why did you deceive me?" He said, "I didn't deceive you. She really is my sister."
She was his half sister, right?
Well, she was his sister.
Yeah.
Half or otherwise, still, he wasn't telling a lie. He was telling the truth. He didn't lie.
Yeah.
Is there not something wrong about him being married to a sister? Sorry, going off track a little bit.
Married. It was his half sister, same father, different mothers,
Okay.
Same question.
and it's okay. From today we would say it's wrong. In the Bible, it would say it was wrong, but at that particular time in history, it wasn't regarded as something that was wrong. It was very common in those days. The pharaohs, they married their sisters. That was what went on. It wasn't wrong in terms of the values of that time.
Also, I think genetically it's just not advisable in today's society. I'm not even sure if it's actually morally wrong on a spiritual level, because ultimately
It is wrong.
Ultimately we're all brothers and sisters.
Yeah, but that's metaphorically.
Oh no, we are actually brothers and sisters. We're all the same family, God.
Yeah, but genetically.
That's a metaphorical thing. No, I mean, the incest taboo is one of the strongest and most powerful and most universal taboos. And I think that's for a very good reason. It is wrong.
Okay. But I'm wondering, is it wrong just because it's physically not?
No, it's not. Because you're mixing two different kinds of love. You're mixing the love of siblings with the love of conjugal love. These different loves should be kept separate in that sense.
But when Adam and Eve purely like brother and sister in their attitude towards each other?
I don't know. I don't know that Adam and Eve were brother and sister.
I mean, at least.
I mean, they may not have had the same natural parents. So in the sense when we say they're brother and sister, it just means that it could have just been a metaphorical thing. They may have actually had different natural parents. They may have been growing up to, like brother and sister, in a sense of not having any kind of, feelings for each other. Just like when you go to school, lots of boys and girls in the same classroom. You don't think is that like that.
So if a child is adopted into a family, they grow up, they might even know they're not brother and sister. And
Yeah.
so their feeling towards each other is totally like my brother and sister. But genetically, they're not like Heathcliff and Catherine in Wuthering Heights. And so their love they have towards each other is purely just brother and sister love. But according to the law, it wouldn't be a sin for them to later marry when they become an adult. So can that love, brother and sister love, graduate into a husband and wife love, as Adam and Eve were meant to? So I'm wondering myself, is it a sin because it's just genetically unhealthy?
No, I think it's just, I said it's a very powerful taboo against incest.
I know.
And I think that is not, which way predates any knowledge of genetics. Because
Instinct is a form of knowledge of genetics, isn't it?
I think it's a very powerful taboo which predates genetics, and I think it's essentially right. Because because then it can corrupt the kind of relationship between brother and sister. And that's what incest is. This relationship becomes corrupted. And if you're having to think, is my brother looking at me with some ulterior motivation? Yes. And then it damages a relationship between brothers and sisters if that becomes socially accepted.
Yeah, but all relationships are actually not right unless you enter into a relationship after becoming perfect. So.
No, forget about this perfection business. Let's just talk about normality.
All right. Well, normality, Adam and Eve were supposed to achieve the first blessing before they
Yeah,
became
sure.
husband and wife.
Well, anyway, they're supposed to at least got to a certain level of maturity before they. Yeah, sure.
So my feeling is that when a person does become one with God, they become a master of love, and then they can change from a brother-sisterly feeling to a husband-wife feeling without corruption. It happens without being perfect.
I think we often use brother and sister too broadly. I think there's a particular relationship within a nuclear family where you have your natural brothers and sisters. That kind of feeling is different from, you may talk about brothers and sisters in Christ, and we're all brothers and sisters, and it doesn't matter which part of the world we come from or colour or nationality, we're all brothers and sisters. That you may say brother and sister, but the quality of that feeling is different than the quality of the feeling you have within the natural family. And I think it's just you eliding the two, where I think just because you use the same words doesn't mean it's the same thing going on.
So you also say an adopted baby who grows up with a sister who's not genetically a sister, you said that would be wrong for them to become husband and wife also.
I think people would generally accept that, yeah. I mean, that's incest. Anyway, so with Abraham then, let's forget about it. Anyway, there's a lot of intermarriage in this family. It's a funny little family. Cousins get married to cousins, etc., etc., etc. So why didn't the Messiah come at this time? Well, Satan's foundation, God's foundation then, was on a family level. Jacob got this victory. But if you look at Satan's foundation, it was on a family, tribal, society, and national level. So it had great empires like the Assyrian and Egyptian empires. So if the Messiah had come at this level here into Jacob's family, it could easily have been wiped out by some marauding army from somewhere. Okay, so there wasn't a foundation to protect the Messiah at this level. So even if, things had worked out well, it was necessary then for them to go through a period of 400 years to get to the level of being a nation. So even if Abraham had made the offering correctly, still the Messiah wouldn't have come at that time. Still there would have been a 400-year period for them to get from being on the family level to the national level. Okay, let's have a look at Jacob's family. Let's say Jacob had 2 wives, Leah. And Leah had 6 sons and 1 daughter. And then Jacob had the other wife, Rachel. She had 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. And then both of them had maids, and they offered their maids to Jacob so they could have children, so he could have children through them. So Zilpah had Gad, and Bilhah had Dan and Naphtali. So there's 4 women involved, and they had 2 wives and 2 concubines. Between them had 12 sons and 1 daughter. Okay. So which one was Jesus descended from?
Judah, number 4.
Judah. Okay, interesting. So we'll try and figure that out why. So what happened next? Okay, so Jacob then had these 12 sons, and Joseph was the son of Rachel, who was his favourite wife, and Joseph was the youngest son and was like the Abel. The reason for that was he was his father's favourite, and he had lots of dreams. He's closer to God than any other brothers, who generally speaking were, they were all shepherds, but they used to go around doing lots of naughty things. And so his father gave him a robe, people often say a robe of many colours. So he's obviously his father's favourite. And he used to stay at home with his father, and his father would send him out to take lunch to his sons, to his brothers, and Jacob would go along. So Joseph would go along and see what his brothers are up to, and he'd come back and gossip and tell his father all the bad things his brothers had got up to. So how do you think his brothers felt about him? Not very happy. First of all, he was a half-brother. But anyway. Secondly, they hated him. They were jealous of Joseph because he was obviously the father's favourite. Got this. He didn't have to do any work, but still he got the cloak of many colours and all this. Then he had all these dreams, and in the dreams that he had, he said that everybody was going to bow down in front of him. And so again, that really annoyed them because they were the older brothers, and why should the older brothers bow down to the younger brother? And they got annoyed by the fact he kept on telling stories. And so they decided they were going to kill him. And so one day Joseph came along to his brothers to, bring some lunch and to just find out what was going on. The brothers saw him coming from a long way off, and they thought, right, now's our chance to kill that wretched, annoying little snotty sneak. And then Reuben, who's the oldest brother, or second oldest brother, Simeon was the oldest. Reuben then felt this was wrong. He said, no, let's not kill him, let's just throw him in the pit. There's a sort of dry well. Let's just throw him in this pit as a punishment, we'll leave him there, and then we can deal with him later. And so they did that, they threw him in the pit. Oh yeah, here it is, the text. When his brothers saw it, their father loved him more than all his brothers. They hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. In other words, they couldn't speak to him without getting really upset and angry. Couldn't have any conversation. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Anyway, then Reuben went off, and then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it to us if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, for our own flesh. Yes? So trying to evoke some sense of empathy. Yes, he's our brother, his own flesh. Anyway, let's at least sell him, let's not kill him. And his brothers listened to him. Then the Midianites, traders, passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites, and they took Joseph to Egypt. And then Reuben came along later. Where's Joseph? Oh, we sold him to the Ishmaelites. So Reuben's really upset. He missed his chance. So Joseph then gets sold into slavery, and he gets bought by somebody called Potiphar, who is, I think, the Pharaoh's captain of the guard. And he works he's bought as a slave, but he's incredibly intelligent, incredibly responsible and hardworking. And so very quickly he wins the affection of Potiphar, he wins his respect and he wins his trust. And so very, very quickly he's promoted within Potiphar's household. And then Potiphar's wife, takes a fancy to Joseph. And his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he's put everything that he has in my charge. He's not kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And she spoke to Joseph day after day, and he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her. So again, you can see here, it's like he's, Joseph in that sense, restoring Adam's position, like a fallen Eve comes along, tries to seduce him, but he keeps his integrity. If he'd fallen, that would be the end of that particular providence. So he keeps his purity, and he feels in his conscience, it's a sin against God. He shouldn't do that. He just follow and listen to his conscience. So he resists his temptation. Anyway, so what happens then is that Potiphar's wife, one day she's in her bedroom, she calls to Joseph, "Can you bring me some lunch to eat?" And so he brings the lunch, and then she says, "Oh, why don't you get into bed with me? Potiphar's out, let's enjoy the afternoon together," etc., etc., etc. And he says no, and he leaves her, and she reaches out and grabs his robe, and to pull him towards her, and he walks off, and the robe gets torn and left behind. And then she screams and shouts, "Rape, rape, rape! Joseph's tried to rape me," and false accusation. And then, of course, Joseph gets arrested. Potiphar wants to kill him. And Potiphar, of course, asks Joseph, what happened, and Joseph explains exactly what happened. And Potiphar thought, yep, you're right, that's exactly what my wife would do. And but Potiphar, he can't do nothing. And so instead of killing Joseph, Potiphar just, puts him in prison, gets thrown into prison. Anyway, so he's in prison now. He's going from, the most trusted person in a wealthy man's household to prison without doing anything wrong himself, completely innocent. So again, he really goes through this incredible experience of being treated unjustly. So when we're treated unfairly, unjustly, how is it easy to react? You become angry, to complain, get resentful. It's not fair, and you start thinking about it. The whole conversation, that's not fair. Yeah, we get stuck, and this grudge develops and grows. Yeah. Anyway, Joseph didn't do that, and the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So Joseph actually in the prison, he got up early in the morning, he prayed. He was able to, forgive the situation and, didn't bear resentment. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in prison. Whatever was done, he was the one who did it. And the keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. So Joseph then, even in prison, he was someone who won the respect of the prison guard, and he was promoted and trusted with everything, yes? Because he's that kind of a person. And then there were two people there who were in the prison. Both of them had dreams. They told their dreams to Joseph, and Joseph interpreted the dreams, and those interpretations were proved true. And one of them, he went back to become the Pharaoh's wine bearer, and Joseph said to him, "Yeah," and the other one was killed. And Joseph said to him, put a good word in for me so I can get out. He'd been in prison for years by now. Anyway, as soon as the butler got out of prison, he forgot all about Joseph. Then one day, the Pharaoh had a dream. He dreamt that there were 7 years of plenty, 7 fat cows, and then 7 very skinny cows. And he couldn't understand what they meant. And he told his priests to come and explain the dream to him. And they couldn't explain it. And then the butler said, "Actually, there's a man I met in prison. He can interpret dreams." And so Joseph gets hauled out of prison, comes to the Pharaoh, tells the Pharaoh what his dream is, interprets and explains the dream means there's going to be 7 years of plenty, good weather, lots of rain, followed by 7 years of famine because there's going to be a drought. And the Pharaoh is really impressed because he could accurately tell the dream. And then the Pharaoh appointed Joseph to become the Prime Minister of Egypt when he's 30 years old. So he became the Prime Minister responsible for organizing the economy to deal, go through this kind of period. And anyway, married somebody called... Anyway, so he had an interesting policy. Anyway, so what he was doing then was during the years of plenty, he stored up food in the granary, in the barns. So when the 7 years of famine came, they'd have plenty of food stored up that they could use to get them through the 7 years. Is this good economics or not?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah? So when the economy is doing really well, the government should be paying off the debt.
Yes.
Yeah? And saving money.
Yes.
So when the difficult time comes, the government's got no debts, and it's got lots of money saved up to get through that time. If you want to be a good economist, just read the Bible. It's all there. That's the basics of economics. Is that what the British government did? No. While the economy is booming, the British government borrowed money and got even. And then when, of course, when the boom finished and you got the bust, you got this huge. Not just in Britain, most governments. The last 10 years or 15 years of economic development, they got.
Why do they need to borrow money?
Because they wanted to spend money they didn't have. The government should spend the money that it gets in through taxation. But if you want to do things and you haven't got enough money from taxes, then you can borrow money.
What did they want to spend it on? Associations?
Well, they spent it on rebuilding houses, rebuilding schools, rebuilding hospitals, employing lots of people. The public sector expanded hugely in terms of numbers of people being employed by the public sector. Yes, and that's the way in which you vote for us and we'll do all this. Yeah, and so that's what happened. So huge amounts of money were borrowed. So anyway, that's just a disaster. Anyway, so so that's what happened then. So Joseph did that, stored up the corn. Anyway, so after the famine started, then this famine was in Egypt, and then it spread to Canaan, where Jacob was living with his sons, and they ran out of food. So Jacob heard that there was lots of food down in Egypt. So he sent his 10 brothers, and he kept Benjamin at home. That was Joseph's brother, but stayed at home. He sent Leah's sons and the other brothers, 10 brothers, down to Egypt to buy grain. So when they appeared in Egypt, then Joseph saw them, because he was the prime minister of Egypt. He was the one who was supervising and overseeing all the distribution of grain. And he saw them, and he recognized that they were his brothers. But they didn't recognize him, because he looked like an Egyptian. And then he accused them of he called them over, questioned them, and accused them of being spies. So how do you think he felt when he saw his older brothers? Sorry? Do you think so?
A bit unhappy about the time he spent in prison and exile and being sold.
Yeah, I would imagine he probably had mixed feelings. On the one hand, he thought his heart probably leapt. Wow, these are my brothers. But of course, he would have thought, well, they sold me into slavery. So you can imagine all kinds of mixed emotions going on. But anyway, he didn't reveal himself to them. He kept his identity, hidden from them. And he accused them of being spies, and he put them in prison, all of them in prison for 3 days. And then he brought them out of prison and he quizzed them and said to them, where do you come from? Canaan. Who's your father? Jacob. Is he still alive? Yes. Have you got any other brothers? Yes. What's his name? Benjamin, younger brother. Okay, so he wanted to find out, how's mum and dad? How's my younger... He wanted all this information without revealing who he was. And then he said, okay, right. He said, you're spies. I don't think you're telling the truth. What I'm going to do, he said, I'm going to keep Simeon. Simeon is the eldest brother, probably the one who organized them to want to kill Joseph, your oldest brother is going to stay behind in prison. And next time you come, you have to bring your youngest brother with you in order to prove to me that you're not spies and you're telling the truth. Okay? So that's what he did. Anyway, so the 10 brothers, they went home together with all the grain that they bought. And, the 9 brothers went home. And you can imagine then Judah wondered, what a shock. One brother got left behind, stuck in prison. And then they told Jacob exactly what had happened. And, that if they were to go back, they had to take Benjamin with them. Anyway, Jacob wasn't happy about this. He'd already lost Joseph, didn't want to lose Benjamin. Anyway, eventually the food ran out, and Jacob said, right, go down and get some more food. And the brothers said, we can't go down unless you take Benjamin with us. And Jacob was really unhappy about this. And then Judah, the 4th brother, he said he would make himself a surety for Benjamin. In other words, he said to Jacob, if something goes wrong, I will take the blame for it. I'll be responsible for Benjamin's life. I will take the blame if anything goes wrong. I'll stand in his place. Anyway, so Jacob said, all right, reluctantly. So they all went down to Egypt. And when they arrived there, then Joseph recognized them and he invited them all in for dinner. And then they all had a big dinner together. And, Joseph organized them all in, the order in which their ages were, and they couldn't understand how he knew all this, and gave Benjamin extra food. And, at the end of the dinner, then he said goodbye to them all, and then he called his servant and told his servant to take his favorite silver cup, the silver cup that belonged to the prime minister, and to put it into Benjamin's sack of grain. And so then they went off the next day, and then Jacob said, someone's stolen my favorite cup. So they went after them, they stopped them, they arrested them, they searched the sacks, they found the cup in Benjamin's sack, and they all brought in front of Joseph. And then Judah said, what shall we say to my lord? What shall we speak? How can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also in whose hand the cup has been found. So what's Judah implying here? God has found out the guilt of your servants. What's he referring to here? Yes. What they'd done to Joseph. Judah felt guilty and felt all the brothers are guilty of selling Joseph into slavery. For all they knew, Joseph, their brother, was dead. They knew how their father never got over this. It really weighed heavily upon them. So they felt maybe God is punishing us for this sin which we committed. Yeah. So he didn't say, Benjamin's guilty, but actually felt we're all guilty. So we can all be punished by you. So they're saying to Joseph, you can punish us all. But Joseph said, this is very interesting, far be it from me that I should do so. Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. So Joseph said to the brothers, only Benjamin needs to remain here. He's the guilty one. He can stay here as my servant. The rest of you can go home. So what choice do the brothers have here? Yeah, they could say to Benjamin, you've been a really naughty boy, Benjamin. You deserve to get punished. We're all going home. If they had done that, how do you think Joseph would have responded or reacted?
I think we would have kept them all in prison.
He would have probably got really upset and angry with them because they would have felt they're doing exactly the same thing to Benjamin as they did to me. And he probably would have got really angry. Yeah? And he would have felt they're just the same selfish, cruel, nasty, etc. brothers that they were however many years ago it was. Yeah? So let's see what happens next. So Judah speaks up. Now this is interesting. This is incredibly important. Now Judah says, now therefore, as soon as I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the grey hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow, the Sheol. In other words, if we go home without Benjamin, Dad, our father will die of heart failure, of grief. And we can't do that to our father, because, we already did it to him once with Joseph. Okay? Then he's talking about himself now. For your servant, that was me, I became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now therefore, please let me remain instead of the boy, as a servant to my Lord, in other words, as your servant, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that will find my father. So what's going on here?
The older brother there, he's offering his life.
Yes. He's exchanging his life for his younger brother. Yeah? He's willing to risk his life for the sake of his younger brother. Yeah? So what do you think about that? Did Esau do that? No. So Judah then, he's willing to exchange his life for the life of his brother because of his love for his father. Because he loves his parents so much, he's willing to, go to prison when he's done nothing wrong, in order that Benjamin, who apparently did do something wrong, could go free. Yeah? So this is the real foundation of substance in that sense. He really loves his brother, he loves Benjamin, so much so he's willing to risk his life and give up his life for the sake of his brother. Yeah?
Is Judah the full brother of Benjamin or half-brother?
Half-brother.
Half-brother.
Not even his full brother, it's his half-brother, yeah. So instead of feeling about Benjamin the same way as he felt about Joseph, now instead of wanting to kill Joseph, he wants to allow himself to be killed to save Joseph's brother. Yeah, completely. You can see Judah's completely changed. In that sense, Judah really overcame his fallen nature. They could have thought, right, yes, let's all go home and leave Benjamin behind. But actually, he overcame that fallen nature, willing to risk his life and exchange his life for the life of his brother. Yeah, so he passed from one side to the other. He overcame his fallen nature. He saw Benjamin from God's point of view. He loved Benjamin so much so he's willing to give his life for Benjamin.
So you think he just matured with age, or do you think he spent time repenting about what he'd done to Joseph, and then that kind of matured him?
Well, if you remember, he was the one who didn't want to kill Joseph, and he sold him into slavery instead. So he already had that kind of heart. Yeah, but here, Reuben as well. Reuben said, let's not kill him, let's put him in the ditch. But then Reuben went off. He wandered off. So he missed the opportunity to save Joseph's life, and he never forgave himself. So Judah actually literally did save his life by selling him into slavery. And then he actually was willing to exchange his life for Benjamin. So you can see it's something extraordinary in this.
So when you say that he established the foundation of substance,
Okay, I'll explain that then. Now, when Israel divided into two, which tribes were in the southern kingdom? Judah and Benjamin. The northern kingdom was the 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom was Benjamin and Judah. So you can see there this love and respect, and they united, and they became the core of the foundation, for the able kingdom. Joseph didn't, they did, because of this foundation of substance made between Judah and Benjamin. But these two tribes formed the southern kingdom, the able kingdom.
David came from the kingdom from the tribe of Dan.
No.
David was from the tribe of Dan.
Oh, David was. Of the house of Judah, wasn't it?
It says it's Dan.
Can't remember, to be honest.
But anyway, Jesus is lying, but I guess.
Can't remember about that. Anyway, so Jesus also came from the house of David as well. And I think, wasn't he from the tribe of Benjamin? David was from the tribe of Benjamin, I think.
I think so, yeah.
You're wrong.
I think so.
Hmm?
So it's from Benjamin, yes.
So the tribe of Benjamin, yeah. Or Saul from the tribe of Benjamin, I can't remember. Anyway, you look it up and then Google it. Anyway, so in that sense, you can see this is a proper foundation of substance was made. That was something which became lasting. Yeah, because, it was something lasting, as opposed to Jacob and Esau, which met and they went their separate ways. Judah and Benjamin continued, and that became the foundation of Judaism up until today, that unity. Anyway, so then Joseph reveals himself. I'm Joseph, is my father still alive? His brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now this is really interesting, what he says next. And do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. It's not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and the lord of his house and a ruler over all the land of Egypt. So what Joseph did, an extraordinary act of generosity, he said, actually, it was God's plan that I could come here and become the prime minister, and so that all these people could be saved and also our family could be saved as well. In that sense, God sent me here in advance. So what you could think of as a terrible series of bad things that happened to him, he said actually he could turn this around into this is the way that God is working. So in that sense he turned what looked like a defeat into a victory. It's exactly what Jacob did. When Jacob was deceived again and again and again, he turned those defeats into victories. And that's what the Messiah does. Who?
David.
Yes, thought so. Saul was from the house of Benjamin, yeah. And so he had no rancor, no accusation. Just like Jesus on the cross, he turned that defeat into a victory. When Father was being beaten, he said, for every time I'm beaten, I can liberate and bless hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah, so in that sense, he enjoyed, or he was grateful for what he was suffering. And that's why it became a condition of indemnity that God was able to claim. God could claim the condition of indemnity Jesus made on the cross because he loved God and forgave his enemies. So that became a condition of indemnity God could use to claim and save all humanity. Because Father, when he was in the concentration camp in Hungnam, he said to himself, I was born to carry sacks of fertilizer on my back. This is why I was born. This is God's will for me to do this. And also he thought, by doing this, what I'm doing when I'm carrying these sacks of fertilizer, I'm carrying fallen people from hell into heaven. So I'm carrying on my back millions of people from hell to heaven. So through doing this, he invested meaning into this activity. So in that sense, it became a condition of indemnity. Because he was just going through the actions. But if he went through these actions resentfully, it would have no meaning, and Satan could claim it. Because he went through these actions in that way, offering it to God and grateful for this situation, and investing this kind of meaning into it, God was able to claim this and bring incredible things out of it. Yeah, so the more Satan hit Father felt, the more Satan hits me, the more I'm persecuted, the more God will, and I treat it in the right way, then the more God will be able to claim as a result. Yeah, so Satan exercised maximum power to destroy Jesus, but he couldn't break Jesus' spirit, and so God was able to resurrect Jesus, and through that to bring salvation through the cross and resurrection, forgiveness of sin and Christianity. Yeah, so this is what Jesus did, Father did, it's what Joseph did, it's what Jacob did. This is a pattern of indemnity. Yeah. And so that's, can you see it? Joseph interpreted what had happened to him, being sold into slavery and all these things. He interpreted it in that way. Yeah, so it's remarkable to do that, isn't it? That's what he did.
It's also really one of the most moving parts, I think.
It's extraordinary, profound and deep, and it's psychological and moving and all sorts of things. It's incredibly profound, attitude towards life. This is, people say, Old Testament, New Testament's better. Actually, the Old Testament is much more profound, really, in terms of understanding of human nature and how to solve problems. It's all there. Everything you need is there. Anyway, and then he says, the brothers reconciled. You may tell my father all my etc. All the good things that happened to me, and he embraced his brother Benjamin. They wept and etc. etc. And then they were reconciled. So this then became the tribal level foundation to receive the Messiah between Joseph and his brothers. But you can see there the brothers are still rather fearful of Joseph. Yeah, but so this Judah Benjamin thing was very significant aspect or part of the story. So why did Joseph do that with the cup and everything? Why was he doing that? Okay. So
You mean hiding the cup and then arresting them?
why did he? Obviously, Joseph set the whole thing up. He stage managed the whole thing. Why was he doing that? Why when they first came, didn't he say, "Oh, great, I'm Joseph"? Why did he stage manage this whole scenario?
I think he was trying to find out, just to make sure that he wanted to know whether his brothers had changed or not.
It's part of it.
To know whether his brother is still alive.
Part of it. What was he doing?
Give them an opportunity to do their part.
Right. He was setting it up to give them the opportunity to show that they had changed. He's giving the opportunity to restore what they'd done wrong. If he just appeared, then so by doing this, they had the opportunity to restore what they'd done wrong. So when Joseph revealed himself, they could, look at each other. Yes, because they could show, actually, we're not the same tricky, nasty brothers that we were 15 years ago. We've changed. We're better. So again, very wise. He was giving them the opportunity to change. He's putting them in the same kind of situation where this time they could react in the right way instead of the wrong way. So he's giving them the opportunity to overcome their fallen nature. So he's setting it up. So again, that's the sort of thing that he was able. He was giving Cain the chance to overcome his fallen nature and try to make it possible and easy for him to overcome his fallen nature. Yeah, and so because of that, then the foundation of substance was restored because they had gone through that. And yes, if he just revealed himself, then nothing would have been accomplished. Yeah, Judah wouldn't have been put in this chance to restore what he'd done. So it's very much like Jesus. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and Jesus knew this. So after the resurrection, then Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" So Jesus is giving Peter the opportunity to restore the mistake that he'd made. Yeah, to put it right. Yeah, so that's like giving him a second chance. So we all want to have a second chance, a chance to prove that we've changed, a chance to prove and to do it right this time round. And so it's good to give people that chance to show that they've changed, to give people another chance to do it right, yeah, as opposed to ignore them or whatever. Yeah, it's very important, significant. Okay, so these are the lessons. Somebody makes a mistake, fails in their responsibility, providence is prolonged. And also we have to separate good and evil within ourselves. So that was what Joseph's brothers were doing. They were confronted with good and evil. The temptation to leave Benjamin behind and go home, or to overcome that and separate from that and follow their original mind, their conscience, do the right thing. Well, that's what they did, where Judah then was willing to sacrifice himself. And so Abel then must serve unconditionally, which is what... and then Cain's heart can change, and Satan must surrender voluntarily. Yeah, so that's the way to do it. As you saw there in Jacob, he made a mistake, and he went through all the things necessary to put things right with his brother. Okay, it's rather a long lecture, I'm afraid. I've finished. Wanted to get to the end there. Any questions?
I had one from way back a little bit.
Okay.
So you think that originally Jacob's whole clan and tribe and Esau's whole clan was supposed to form the chosen people, not just Jacob's tribe?
Yes, if Jacob and Esau had been able to make a proper foundation of substance when they were younger and such that they lived together, yes, that's what would have happened. And that's what should have happened. But unfortunately, Jacob restored the mistake he'd made with Esau but they weren't able to go on to the next level of actually being able to unite and stick together. That was only done with Judah and Benjamin. Well, it was done with Joseph and the brothers, but again, you can see, when you look at the story, it wasn't as deep, and that's why it did split in that way, but this relationship between Judah and Benjamin is much deeper. Judah is willing to risk his life and give his life up for Benjamin. So that's why those two stuck together, those two tribes. Became really one with each other on a very deep level. Whereas the unity between Joseph and the other tribes was restored and embraced, but it's a bit more like the Jacob-Esau thing. It wasn't as deep as it was with Judah and Benjamin. So later on they did divide, yeah.
So in Esau's tribe, there could have been people with some amazing lineages that could have benefited from merging with Israel, but that didn't happen. So there's no knowing how much effort, how much work God could have lost because.
But yeah, I mean, we're on plan Z squared at the moment, to be honest. And you can say the same about any period in history. You look at, there's 10 tribes that got lost here, only 2 left, and things went wrong. And the plan God's working on, this is plan Z cubed. Yeah, I mean, this one went wrong, and then had to be this plan, and this one, and this one, and this one. It's we're way off the original
That's why it's taken
plan.
so long.
Yes, because every time there's a mistake, then God has to come up with a new plan, has to adjust it to, okay, that's what's happened. Okay, we'll have to work with this reality. Okay, then they did this right. Well, we'll work with this reality. They did that wrong. We'll have to see what we can do with that. And that's just the way it works. Yes.
How did they, because they ended up as slaves, how did that happen?
Well, that's because of Joseph's economic policies, actually. He was very good in planning, but then what happened then is when they had these huge silos of grain, then Joseph sold the grain to people. And of course, because there's no farming going on, people weren't generating any wealth, so they had to buy the grain. So first they bought it with the money they had, okay, but then they ran out of money. Then they bought it with the savings that they had. They ran out of savings. Then they still needed to eat, so they said, okay, we'll sell our house for grain. We'll sell our land. So after the end of 7 years, in the Bible it says after 7 years, the Pharaoh ended up owning everything. And the people owned nothing.
Is that what's happening in China today?
Kind of. And so that's what happened. The Pharaoh owned everything and nobody else owned anything. And so that's except for Jacob's family, who were given this piece of land by the Egyptians, Pharaoh, as thankful. And so all the Egyptians then, they were reduced to, they were propertyless.
Why did then Jacob's family become slaves?
Okay, so Pharaoh then ended up owning the whole country, and the Egyptians owned nothing. But then what happened then is Jacob's family, they had their property, they had their land, they're multiplying, they're becoming very, very prosperous. And after a while, how do you think the Egyptians, who were landless and propertyless, felt about all these Hebrews who were really rich and doing very well? How do you think they felt about them? Didn't like them. Who are all these foreigners living in our country who are so prosperous and doing so well? Sorry? No, they were in Egypt. Okay. The reason they're in Egypt is Joseph went into Egypt first, and then all the family came down into Egypt. So the Pharaoh said to Joseph, bring all your family. So the whole family then moved down into Egypt. Jacob and all the sons, they moved into Egypt. And then Pharaoh gave them a large piece of land to live in.
Do you know where that was?
What?
Did he say where that was?
I think it's a place called Goshen. I need to check.
It's interesting because
Just a sec. Okay, so you had the Hebrews, who were not Egyptians, who were really prospering, and you had the Pharaoh and all the other Egyptians, the Pharaoh who's very wealthy and all the other Egyptians who weren't. And so people felt, these foreigners are going to take over our country. And so Pharaoh thought, well, how can we stop these foreigners from taking over our country? So eventually he reduced them to slavery and turned them into slaves.
This happened, they became slaves, it was a they somehow became slaves.
Okay, this is how it happened. According to the Talmud, So Pharaoh, you want to make people into slaves. You can't do it overnight. You have to come up with a cunning plan. And so the plan was the Pharaoh wanted to engage in all these huge building projects, right? Pyramids and all these sort of huge, construction, public works. And so he invited people to come and work and paid them well. So lots of the Egyptians went to work on these huge projects. Lots of the Hebrews went to work on these projects because they could get paid well working for the state, because the Pharaoh had all this money. He could afford to build all these great things. And so lots of the Hebrews and the Egyptians, they went to work. And so eventually, all the Hebrews and most of the Egyptians are all working for the Pharaoh. And the next stage was, they're all working on the same level. The next stage was, the Pharaoh issued a law saying that only Egyptians could be managers, and the Hebrews all had to be workers. And so some Hebrews thought, well, that's not fair, I'm going back to my old business. But then if they tried to do that, then they would get beaten up, and the police would come around and force them to go back to work. And they were still getting paid. And so you had the Egyptians who were all the managers, and the Hebrews were just workers, and gradually they reduced the wages of the Hebrews lower and lower and lower, and prevented them from going back to their old businesses until eventually they were reduced to slavery. And that's what happens when you go and work for the state.
Isn't it interesting that I heard stories that when the Jews came to Europe like 1,000 years ago,
Yeah.
a lot of them were rich and they propped up the government. Like in Britain, I heard that the king's government was collapsing, and it was the money loaned by the Jews.
Yeah, sure.
Propped them up.
Yeah.
And then over time, like in Germany, the Jews were so prosperous that the Germans were resentful and basically ended up enslaving them and putting them in concentration camps.
Yeah, there's lots of envy going on, yeah. Because,
Is there a similar process though that happened?
yes,
Joseph came and saved Egypt, right?
yes.
And then over time, the Egyptians were resentful against the Israelites' prosperity, and then ended
Well,
up
but, but you have to remember, the reason why the Egyptians were penniless is because of Joseph's economic policy. He sold grain, and all the Egyptians ended up penniless.
But could they
they would have been dead otherwise.
Well, sorry?
Couldn't they have all died otherwise?
Well, I think he should have just, I know it's not good conservative politics, but he should have just given the grain away for free. That would have been a better way, instead of selling it such that people ended up with nothing. The government had all this grain that it is set aside. It should have just given the grain to the people for free. Given it out as rations, a genuine public welfare. Sorry?
In the long run, it would have been good.
Yes, it would have been, yeah. Lots of, it's interesting, it says basic economics. What happens if you do this? It's interesting.
It's basically just a handbook, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. I mean, there's a lot more to it than what I said. You can actually go and you unpick it. And it's, yes, please.